On this table, this is what I call a VIP table. The Rathbini's comprise Dan Holtzman and Barry Friedman. This is them sitting back to back, juggling the over-the-head 7 clubs. Danny kept getting clubs signed by people that they worked for or with. This is only a small portion of the clubs that he had, and in it I've taken pictures of the people. Here's one signed by Ronald Reagan, a past president of the United States. This club is signed by Walter Matthau and George Burns. Here's one signed by Jonathan Winters, Billy Crystal, Tom Jones. Here's one Donald O'Connor and Bob Hope. Here is the last club signed by, this is a 1976 paper of Johnny Carson, with Johnny Carson on the front. It's also signed by Doc Severinsen and Ed McMahon. This machete was thrown around during one of the 2 performances by the Rathbini's. It was thrown around Johnny Carson during their March 26, 1986 performance. We'll come to the next table. Here's a photograph of Gina Schwartzman, who came Russian descent. Her mother and father, her father was a juggler, her mother was an Olympic gymnast. And here are a few hoops. Jeff Taveja hoop, Rudy Horn hoop, Harry Parker hoop, David Lee, some of his hoops, Jim Strinka, and he married Keziah Templebaum, one of air jazz, the female in air jazz. She was one of the great American jugglers. Here's one signed by Lottie Brun. As you see, even here is Keziah's signature here. Here's some Ken Bench clubs, and here is one of my greatest prizes, Francis Brun. That's a ball signed by Francis Brun, one of the great jugglers. He came to the United States in 1948. This picture shows him holding that ball. Here he is doing his last trick, and here is a poster of him taken in 1948. It's similar to the picture, the photograph. However, the only thing different here than when he later did it are the 2 things. He dressed differently, and he also had 2 hoops or rings spinning around his right hand as the ball spun on his finger. We come to the next table. Gregory Popovich, another great Russian juggler. This is one of his clubs. Harry Parker, born in 1919, passing away in 2003. We have all of his clubs, his balls, and his hoops in our archives. This is one of Harry Lynn's not only creation, but he used this particular club in his club swinging act. Here is Larry Weeks, a club that he used. He was in a Here Comes the Army, a Hollywood movie of 1940. Bobby May, the great international juggler. Here's a top hat of him. We do have a drum of his in the collection. Here's a couple cups of his, and of course one of his clubs, of which I've probably got 10 of his juggling clubs. The Flying Karamazov brothers, this is a drum head. They're signed by the 5 of them. Here's a picture taken, and this drum down here is the one that is signed. Here is Bobby May, by the way, a poster we went in before. Andrew Head was a 2-time winner at the IJA Festival, taking the championships, the senior championships. This is his original derby that he used. This is a photograph that was pen-drawn by my granddaughter, Danny Frederick. Her maiden name was Smith. This is one of the Osmani girls performing. The Bakers did a knockabout juggling act. This is one of their boomerang hats. After her husband died, Harry, Peggy, when she was 92, sold all of her equipment, and I was lucky enough to get one of their hats. Tuan Lee, this is a hat owned by possibly the greatest hat juggler that ever lived. Tuan Lee is from Vietnam. He juggled 7 of these. He has done this in a show. 5 hat back throws until he wants to stop, and he's great with large his 3-ball routine, and this is one of his boomerang hats that was signed. Anatoly, and here he is with his wife. These, of course, are just photographs along the back wall. Tommy Curtin. Tommy Curtin was from Bristol, Tennessee. Of course, 50 years ago, he was president of the IJA back in 1961. This is one of his octagon clubs that was manufactured by Harry Lind. Here is a picture of him with one of these. He used 3 different. These clubs were manufactured by Stu Reynolds. Gina Schwartzman was a great Russian juggler. We showed you a photograph of her before. She came over when she was 14. This picture of her is probably when she was 21 or 22. She is now married. This parasol belonged to Jay Green, and here's John McPeak. He now resides in Las Vegas. That's his club. Here's Steve, another club of Steve Mills. This next club is one of a handful of greatest jugglers that ever lived. Eugene Belauer. Eugene is a master juggler from Russia, one of the best that could ever be seen. Here is Foodie George Zelak Club. Of course, these are all hand paintings. Enrico Rastelli, etc., right on down, all by Dick Franco. They were also used in a book that I published for each chapter. Billy Turco was from Allentown, Pennsylvania. He saw the great Rastelli back in 1930 performing on one of his trips to the United States, and he knew Jack Van Wyck, and he told him about this man using a mouth stick, and this was the mouth stick that he made for him. Of course, you see, instead of having a flat, they didn't know how it went. It was just turned around. The tooth marks are still there from Billy Turco. He was a great juggler that did fairs in the 30s and 20s, 30s, and 40s. Here's a club, a fire torch owned by Steve Mills. This is Natalie Enderline, a picture of her. She was the partner of Francis Brun, and she did a tremendous act herself. I met her the first time in the Lido in Paris as she was performing. Another person on the bill was Rudy Schweitzer, another great juggler. Here is Michael Cherick, a ball that Michael Cherick used in his act. He does a brilliant act. One of another handful of the world's greatest jugglers that ever lived was Sergei Ignatov. This is one of his signed clubs. He came over here and set the Western Hemisphere on fire with his routines. Here's a few clubs, or a few objects that were owned by Paul Bachman. Here is one poor picture of him using this particular club, and this one is him in a show kicking a ball with his heel over his head and catching it on a mouth stick. This mouth stick was used with a beer bottle routine, flipping in different ways. Mark Fay, they call him the most dangerous juggler. Technically, he's a very, very fine juggler. This is one of his mouth sticks. Kit Summers. Kit Summers was working at Bally's in Atlantic City, and an accident with a truck made him unconscious for 34 days. When he came to, he still tried to juggle, but his motor skills deteriorated. He still could juggle a little, but never resumed what he once had. Stan Kavanagh. Stan Kavanagh was one of the best comedic jugglers that ever lived. He brought people to hysteria. In the Life magazine, they had a full page on him. And in one Broadway movie, or a Hollywood movie, he was a taxi cab driver. This is an actual club owned. It was a Van Wyck club, and that you can see is identical to the club that he's juggling there. The next one, Johnny Lux, he's another man that passed away. This is one of his clubs. He made his own clubs. These two pictures here are stepfather and son. This son happens to be a Vance Negato when he was young. This club is when he was roughly 35 years of age. Vance Negato is not the king of jugglers, but the god of jugglers. In my opinion, he is the strongest juggler that ever was in this planet. And that exceeds over the 6 billion people that there are on this earth. Technically, he is supreme. Now, showmanship, he's added lots of showmanship, and personally, he's one of the fastest jugglers. He throws 9 rings away. He does them until he wants to stop in a show. He's an unbelievable juggler. This picture of his father, Nick Gatto, was taken at the very first IJA festival in 1948. There he is with the ball and mouse stick. He also worked on the Ed Sullivan show with the Los Gatos, with Tommy and Albert Lucas's father, Albert Morera. This is 4 objects from Bobby Jewell. He is 87 years old as of today, and 87 years old. This is a cup that was painted at the Olympia Theater. He had 4, not cup but glass. He had 4 of these glasses a artist made, and he gave me one of them. Bobby Jewell, that's on the bill. That's one of the bills. That's one of his mouthpieces. This is a hoop made in 1950 by Harry Lynn for him, and he wore this hat in one of his shows.